Everybody, we're So I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting, June 20th, 2024. Sorry, we're running a little late. The City Council had a meeting that ran late, so we're just starting when we can. Can I have a roll call vote, please? Roll call.
Yes. Commissioner Light?
Present.
Commissioner Boswell?
Present.
Commissioner Craig?
Present.
Commissioner Gaddis?
Present.
Commissioner Conroy?
Here.
Commissioner Lamb?
Here.
Chairperson Hazeltine?
Here. Okay, salute to the flag, please. And on three, 1, 2, 3. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, could I get a motion to approve the order of the agenda?
Motion to approve the order of agenda.
And second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so be it. And we have a blue folder item tonight, so if I could get a,
Motion to receive and file.
and second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, perfect. We have consent calendar, which is basically city business that's put under the calendar, and we can, does anybody want to pull this one consent calendar item and talk about it? No? Anybody in the public? Online?
Public comment.
Public comment? No. Okay, so motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to approve the
All in
consent
favor?
calendar.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so be it. Okay, so we have this public participation on non-agenda items, and this section is intended to provide members with the public the opportunity to comment on any subject that does not appear in this agenda for action. The section is limited to 30 minutes. Each speaker will be afforded 3 minutes to address the commission. Each speaker will be permitted to speak only once when written requests, if any, will be considered first under this section. Do we have any written requests? Did you want to speak on the, yes, go ahead and come on up.
Okay. Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak before you and about my concern. 2 buildings near my residence have been vacant for at least 10 years.
Could you identify yourself, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you had my form.
I didn't get it, actually. I'm
My
sorry.
name is Jim Mueller. I live at 2010 Matthews Avenue.
Okay, thank you so much, Jim.
Okay?
Okay, go ahead, I apologize. You can raise the podium if you'd like, if it's too short.
No,
There's
it's
a little
fine.
switch. Okay,
Thank you.
perfect. Okay.
Yes, there are 2 buildings near my residence that have been vacant for at least 10 years. They are in a sorry state relative to the standard of the neighborhood around them. They both have low tax rates, One is a commercial property. The city of Redondo Beach is losing thousands of dollars a year on this particular property and other vacant properties in the districts. They are not owned by residents or voters of Redondo Beach. The owners are crafty. They do just enough to keep code enforcement off their backs. But if you saw these properties in the midst of properties in much better condition, you would say, as I did, there have to be code violations here. But I have repeatedly brought these properties to the attention of code enforcement, and they tell me there's nothing they can do. So I hope I'm addressing the correct body here. I believe that a new code is necessary to cover buildings that are chronically vacant. And this is because just by walking around in districts 5 and 4, I have found 4 additionally chronically vacant buildings. Now, you may think that people would be willing to sell these buildings rapidly. I mean, to keep them vacant for 10 years, why are they keeping them that way? Well, I believe that it's for tax purposes. They're dodging taxes. But at the same time, they absorb Redondo Beach resources. They absorb the fire protection, police protection, public works, and other things. And they are costing the citizens of Redondo Beach while providing no compensating revenue. So therefore, I have a proposed addition to the Redondo Beach Municipal Building Code that I will be happy to hand in today, that I would like, if it's appropriate, if this is the appropriate body, for you to consider adding that to the code. And essentially what it does is provide for identification of what kinds of buildings are the buildings that I'm talking about and what to do about them. And, you know, I'm not talking about any draconian thing like dragging the people into prison or anything like that. I really think that what we need to do is to encourage them to plan to develop these buildings and to have the encouragement forceful enough to overcome their reluctance to engage in sales that may require tax payments, because I believe that's really the problem. And most of these properties, by the way, are not owned by residents or voters in Redondo Beach. So, thank you.
Motion to receive and file this document that he's offering.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So be
Thank
it.
you.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Where are these properties? Where,
Well,
you said Matthews? Where,
excuse me?
you said it's on Matthews?
Yes, there's a 2002 Matthews is one of the properties. It's been vacant for over a decade.
What's the cross street?
The cross street is Green, between Green and Blossom.
Okay.
There's 2017 Artesia Boulevard, which actually is a fairly large piece of property that used to be a school. But it's been vacant for probably more than a decade as well. There are several residences. 2808 Faber is one. 2702 Matthews is another. There's also 2400 Burritt
Oh,
that I've
boy.
identified just by walking around.
Right.
But I
Did
think
you
a
by
thorough,
chance,
excuse me.
I'm sorry, did you talk to your council person by chance? yet?
Absolutely. I've talked to
Okay.
the code enforcement people, the council, several council people, by the way, because multiple districts are involved. I've sent copies of my email to the city manager and the city attorney. So this is why I'm kind of going to the next step here to actually propose a code change.
Did they tell you about the aviation Artesia corridor and the big plans for redoing? Well, we're working on the general plan starting tonight. We're starting to get going on that, and I think you might be interested in that.
I am. In fact, I would like to stay and
Okay,
listen to
perfect.
what's
Perfect.
going to happen.
Yeah, it's right on topic.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So can I have a motion to receive and file the written, oh, we already did that? Okay. We are going to go down to Planning Director Weiner for the overview of the draft general plan update and associated zoning ordinance amendments. And do we have any public comment on that before we get started?
No e-comments at this time.
Okay, and there's no one online or,
No attendees at this time.
Thank you, thank you. Okay.
Yeah, good evening, Commission. Thanks for joining us tonight. For this presentation, I'm going to do the first half of it. Sean is going to provide the second half. I'm going to give a high-level overview of the general plan update and zoning ordinance, which is currently being worked on. And really the purpose of tonight's meeting, it's an informational item. This is not a public hearing. The Planning Commission will not be making any decisions tonight. However, we do want to provide you with this information in advance of the hearings where you are going to be making decisions on the general plan, which are going to be in the coming months. We want to provide the background and an overview of it. So next slide, Sean. So as you probably know, over the past several years, the city has been updating certain elements of its general plan. A committee was formed by the city council. They met nearly 30 times, and a lot of public input was provided on the process. I'm going to just give a real high-level overview of what the general plan is. It's really the most important planning document that the city has. It's referred to as the Constitution of the city, and it sets the policies and standards for all other planning documents that like the zoning code and specific plans that are there to implement it. The general plan includes certain elements that are required by state law. That includes the land use element, the housing element, transportation, open space. And I would say really the land use element and the housing are probably the most impactful in terms of future development in the city and what the city is going to look like and what the density is going to be and items such as that. So a few things about the general plan. First, it needs to be internally consistent. That means there needs to be consistency amongst the different elements. So if you have an adopted housing element, the land use element should be consistent with that. It also needs to be consistent with all the other planning documents that we have to help implement those policies, such as the zoning code or a specific plan. And really, it's the policies in the general plan that help dictate the zoning standards that the city adopts. So for example, say if a city has a industrial zone and it has a vision for it of becoming a mixed use district and something completely different, the general plan would identify that, and it would include a number of policy statements that would help the city achieve that goal of changing the use of that area. Next slide, Sean. So the elements that are being updated currently, what's been in process the past several years, is the land use element, the open space and conservation element, safety element, and noise element. And really a lot of the focus is going into the land use element, because as I said, that's very critical to the future development patterns of the city. The ones that are not being currently updated are the utilities element, the solid waste, transportation and circulation, because that was done relatively recently, and the housing element, which was adopted in 2022 and certified by the state Department of Housing and Community Development. And really, it's the housing element. It's a big part, a driver of this effort. So I was going to cover that next. Go ahead, Sean. So yes, the Redondo Beach has a certified housing element. It was certified on July 5th, 2022. And the housing element includes a number of policies and programs that help further affordable housing development within the city. And some of it's dictated by the state. There's something called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment or Allocation, also referred to as RHNA. And it's a number, it's handed down by the state through an intermediary government agency, and it determines how many housing units that we have to accommodate to plan for future growth. So the city of Redondo Beach received a RHNA of 2,490, and the housing units are of various income levels, and that's based on the area median income. And there's a whole equation that goes into determining that. And basically, the cost of housing should only be a percentage of the income level based on those different categories. I will say that the city is not responsible for constructing those housing units, but we do have to have zoning standards and policies in place that could accommodate it if the developer chose to pursue a project here. And for that reason, the housing element proposes 6 overlay zones throughout the city. Most of them are located next to public transit that would allow a density of 55 dwelling units per acre with a minimum density of 20 dwelling units per acre. And by creating this overlay zone in those different districts is how the city is able to meet the RENA requirement. Next slide, Sean. So the map you see there shows 5 of the RENA sites. There's one up in the north end of town, the North Tech District. The other are around the Galleria site. The majority are there. And all these are adjacent to public transit, within half a mile of high-quality public transit. And then there's also a site on 190th Street, which is identified at the bottom of the map. And then go to the next slide, Sean. And then we also have one on the very south end of Redondo, which is currently occupied by a FedEx building, which is one of the RENA sites. So the housing element directs the city to rezone and make amendments to the general plan, the land use element, that can accommodate housing at a certain density at those sites. So that's been a big driver of this update process.
All right, hold on with Sheila. I mean,
Just a
Commissioner.
quick comment, because I know it's a controversial issue, how the units were throughout how they were chosen throughout the city, and that was because of the minimum lot size that Sacramento required, correct? That there was a minimum lot size that had to be addressed. You couldn't just have a small lot. You had to have a lot that was, I think, 1,000 square feet. Is that correct?
Yeah,
No,
that's
or more.
correct. It's a site, I think the minimum, it's measured in acreage. Do you recall,
Acres.
Sean?
I don't know the exact figure, but yeah, there's a number of factors, lot size being one of them, that would qualify each of these housing sites that we have. So that was a limiting factor in some of the locations as well, for sure.
Right. And I have one question while we're going along. These these lots, they're already incorporated into the general plan, right?
Into the housing element, and now we are in the process of updating the land use element
Okay.
to bring it into harmony with the housing element.
Okay, got it. Okay, go ahead. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Next slide, Sean. So a little more background on the housing element. So there is a program in there. It requires us to make these changes by February 2025. So we're on a bit of a tight timeline. And if the city does not make these zoning and land use element changes, then we run the risk of having our housing element decertified. And then there's something in state law called builder's remedy, which would allow a developer to come in and apply for a housing project at any location in the city, and it would not be subject to the city's zoning standards. So it could be at high density, it could be at the height the developer would like. It's a pretty heavy-handed way of submitting a project. So that's what we run the risk of that if our housing element becomes uncertified. And to add a little more into the mix of the equation is Article 27, which was a voter-passed initiative that requires, and it's specific to Redondo, any changes to the city's general plan or zoning code that would intensify land use up to a certain threshold or require voter approval to make that change. So we have scheduled to put these changes on the ballot once they're adopted by the city council, the amendment to the land use element of the general plan, the zoning code. However, there was a recent court decision where a judge weighed in on this and decided that the city, as it pertains to Article 27, is preempted by state law. State law will always preempt local law, has authority over local jurisdictions. And for that reason, as it pertains to housing and implementing programs in the housing element, which are driven by the state, those Article 27 is preempted. So that said, that's the position the city is taking regarding this matter. So we should not be in violation of, have the potential of having our housing element uncertified. However, we're doing a belt and suspenders approach by still taking the matter to the ballot and having the voters, potentially having the voters approve the changes. And there's some changes that go beyond just housing, like to the Artesia aviation corridor area that are not preempted by state law. So that's still, it's being sorted out by the city attorney and the city council, but I just wanted to give the planning commission some background on the legal issues surrounding that. Next slide, Sean. I wanted to provide the tentative project schedule for this. So we are in a tight deadline to get this through the process. Around end of July, we plan on releasing the draft EIR for public comment. There's a 45-day public comment period. However, during that time, the land use plan can come to the planning commission for review. We have a concept review scheduled for August by the planning commission. So that's going to be another chance for the planning commission to review it, to provide recommendations. And that's why, and the reason we're having this meeting tonight is so that we don't want to save it until the last minute to really introduce you to what's being proposed here. And then finally, in September, the item will come to the planning commission for a more formal review. The planning commission will make recommendations to the city council on its adoption. And that's a requirement of state law to do that for the zoning ordinance and for the general plan update. And then finally, we have it scheduled to go to the city council in October for adoption. So it's a fairly aggressive schedule. However, the project is lining up where we feel that we can meet this schedule. And it really starts with this meeting tonight and providing the overview. And with that, I'll turn it to Sean to discuss some of the details of the general plan update and really the meat of what we're considering here.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot, Mark. Thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission, Sean Scully, Planning Manager. So yeah, I'll walk you through some of the work, still pretty high level. The hard work our GPAC did over, 6 years? We've got a couple members on the dais tonight that can attest to that, but they really accomplished a lot in the time we spent, particularly, and this is as a result of one of our planning commissioners, I would say, kind of sprang the idea of having a vision statement and guiding principles. So there was a lot of work on that really shaped the discussions of the General Plan Advisory Committee. And the City Council has approved and adopted the vision statement and guiding principles that are in the introduction section of the general plan, the new general plan, the general plan update. We've never had an introduction section for our general plan, so that's a new element it's not an element, but a new component to it that you'll see. And then the development of the city's draft Artesian Aviation Corridor Area Plan. There was a time when we were grinding through all the work of GPAC where City Council would kind of brainstorm something and then just, let's give it to GPAC. And the task list grew, the number of meetings grew, but it really, turned out some really good work. And particularly the Artesian Aviation Corridor Area Plan, which the council went on and adopted. And since then, as you might recall, one of the points Mark made was about how there has to be consistency between these documents. And as a result of the ACAP, we amended the zoning ordinance and we amended the general plan so that they were all consistent. And you guys spent a lot of time on that. And then they also updated the draft land use designations, the map, and then the elements that Mark identified. There's new, and this is really where a lot of the work of this body is going to come into play with new goals and policies that are outlined in the different elements. That's the opportunity for the body here, this body, to begin to think about, review those goals and policies, see if there's additional elements or components that might be of value that you'd want to bring to the rest of the body. And then if there's consensus, those would go on with the draft document as a companion document onto city council. But just hitting some of the highlights of the land use designations changes Mark had touched on. We have our 6 overlay zones for our housing sites. That's an implementation of the housing element. And then kind of outside of that, we have, there's not a whole lot of change, truthfully. There's some adjustments to FAR, floor area ratios, in some of the zoning categories, particularly the biggest being in the ACAP, the Aviation and Artesia Boulevard, from the 0.6 to the 1.5. And then there's another FAR change for public institutional zones or designations. Our current general plan does not have an FAR for public institutional designations, and that's required by law. So we have a 0.75 on the majority of the public institution designations, and then 1.25 on the city hall and the city annex. That's currently what's recommended now. And then and I mentioned that last item about the FAR for the Artesia Aviation Corridor. So the next couple slides are just really a couple of examples of the goals and policies that are in the elements that will be coming before this body. First, the land use element, and I just highlighted a couple, and one is the goal of a balanced community, sustainable community with a range of land uses that meets all the needs of Redondo Beach residents and offers employment, commercial, recreational, and housing opportunities. So it's trying to achieve balance in the community. And this is a real big issue for the city, is our jobs to housing balance. So we have a policy to try to create jobs that meet or that match the residents of Redondo Beach. So that was a real big emphasis as we were going through land use, was to try to get jobs here in Redondo that matched the residents that live in Redondo. So it would reduce a lot of traffic, obviously. Another one that I know is of particular interest to this commission is the environmental sustainability. And I just tagged one of the policies, and there's a lot of them under that goal. And one of them is preserve and expand native habitat and encourage the use of native plants and landscaping. So now we've got a policy that's driving that. So when we're working on these projects and bringing them to you, we'll be asking for that. And then that'll be, and it's based in the implementation of this policy. Another kind of new area for the update in the land use element is historic preservation. We don't have any land use policies in our current general plan that speak to historic preservation. So, you'll see a number of policies that address that, and that's going to be an issue moving forward, how we, update, we budgeted another historic resource survey for the city. So there'll be policies to support all that work. The next element that I think is right up there with our land use element in terms of the importance for the city is open space and conservation. That element, that was actually the first, there was only 2 elements we were going to update when we started this back in 2016, and this was the other one. Just again, a couple of highlights, the goal, trying to increase the quantity, location, and access to parks. Right now, it's common knowledge we're underparked. We have a very low ratio of parkland to residential population. It's about 2.4 or something. The state, our goal right now is to achieve 3 acres per 1,000 residents, and then with an aspiration to get to 5 acres per 1,000 residents. So 3 is a real big threshold because it allows, if we hit the 3 acres of parkland per 1,000, we actually can make an adjustment to the Quimby fee that resets that dollar amount to increase revenues towards more parkland, and it gets set at a 5 acre per parkland. There's a formula in our subdivision ordinance that details all that. But right now, we're at a fee rate based on the 3 acres per 1,000. Another goal I'll credit to one of our planning commissioners is a goal in open space -3, prominent public viewpoints. That is, we've never had protected views in the city. And this is a new goal and a host of policies to try to protect some of the public views. So not private views, but public views, meaning, from certain roadways, maintaining our views of the ocean, whatever other visual or scenic resource that you guys will look at and the council will ultimately adopt. So that's a pretty exciting change for the city. And then there's another goal for open space, and it's all about funding. How do we fund our desire to grow the amount of acreage we have for parks and open space? So, and there's a whole bunch of policies on that. So I just wanted to highlight just a few from that element. And then the last two elements that we're updating is the noise element and the safety element. And the first policy on the noise element, noise compatibility, and you guys deal with this all the time. And it's really, we have a policy now that really sets up, all the requirements we're asking of the development community to, make sure we're not creating noise impacts on adjacent residences and those noise sensitive, type of land uses. So there's that. And then the safety element goals and policies. And this is kind of interesting because there's a lot of new state laws that are having to update safety elements on a more regular basis, namely, sea level rise, climate change, and emergency preparedness as a result of hazards from climate change that are happening. So there's a whole bunch of new elements that are really our new goals and policies that are really looking at how do we become more resilient as a city. So those are the elements that that we've updated. The General Plan Advisory Committee worked really hard on creating all the goals and policies, and that's really where we'd be looking for the Planning Commission to take a good look at those policies and really make some edits, potentially maybe additional policies, and have some discussions about that as we move forward. And let's see. Just one other element in our, one other slide here on the land use element is there, in addition to the goals and policies, the general topic areas that I was discussing, we also have special policy areas, and there's a number of them. And they have very specific goals and policies just for these areas. And there's 7 of them. Actually, there's more. There's 5A, B, and C. So, that's another area where you could really look closely at to see if we're really lining up the policies and goals for those specific areas. And then here's just an example of where those areas are illustrated on the map here. The North Redondo Tech District, the Artesia Boulevard, also aviation as well is another special policy area. And then, of course, the village, trying to preserve and enhance and grow, the good qualities in some of these areas or revitalize those areas. Then what has to go with all this is our zoning ordinance amendments. And those we're finalizing those as well. And they're almost all of them are implementation of the housing element. So there's not a lot of, they're fairly set, But there, there will be opportunities to take a look at some of the details that are coming with those amendments. That last bullet point is noteworthy. This is another, it's a program in the housing element. It says parking requirements will be adjusted to account for both size and the number of bedrooms, so standards don't discourage the development of small units. So a one-bedroom unit would have a lesser parking generation rate than a 2 and a 3-bedroom unit. So that's something that's new to what we're going to, and again, driven by the housing element. And then this is just a slide we wanted to throw in there that, there's a lot of discussion about FAR, and this just kind of breaks down how we calculate FAR and kind of what it looks like visually. Certainly as you increase your FAR, your numbers of stories go up. We don't have a lot coverage standard. Our standards are setbacks and parking, and that really drives how that ground, the grade level is developed. And then with an increased floor area ratio, you just got to, the higher that goes, the more stories you're going to be looking at. And so that concludes the staff presentation. We just have we recommend you receive and file the report, and then, just a recommendation to review the proposed land use, open space, and conservation element, and noise and safety elements, the goals and policies in particular in there.
Thank you.
Okay.
We can take some questions from up here for you guys tonight. And then do you have any questions?
Not so far. Thank you.
Okay. And then do we have anybody on the,
No e-attendance and no e-comments.
okay, thank
And
you.
motion to receive and file?
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So be it. So now, questions?
You want to go first?
No, go ahead. Oh,
No,
Rob?
no, she's been typing away like crazy, so I think she has a long list over there.
Okay.
So
I do have a lot of questions. Let me start with this one. Would you describe the policy to implementation process? Okay, so there's a process that happens. Often we talk about, these distinct, now we're doing this, now we're doing that, but we don't often talk about what that process looks like. So I'm wondering if you could, an example is the jobs housing balance. You gave a really great example, right? What would that whole policy to implementation process look like? And if we could have the jobs housing balance picture up.
I get to take the first stab at it.
Yeah, sure.
All right, I'll take the first stab at it. So it's not a one-size-fits-all in terms of process. Usually what it would be is that we would bring proposed zoning code amendments to the Planning Commission and eventually the City Council. We would reference the general plan policies and try to identify how it's consistent with those policies. The jobs housing balance, for example, may be one that as the city is evaluating the general plan and whether it's being implemented properly, we would identify these policies and decide what implementation measures need to be put in place to make these things happen. So for example, and I'll say with some of the policies, they're not gonna all happen with this zoning code updates. But moving forward, ideally, the Planning Commission would receive a report on the general plan annually where we would evaluate the different policies and we'd create a work plan and come up with a strategy for how we can implement it, whether it's through amending the zoning code, creating a specific plan. And really it goes beyond just creating plans. Any action taken by the city or the city council should really be directed by the general plan as well.
Right, that's very helpful. What you're, that was also a lot of information. What you're saying is that it's not all going to happen through this general plan process, correct? That this general plan process is essentially about reviewing the policies. And for example, LU 1.4 jobs, housing, balance, right? There's probably 150 of these policies, right? And we're reviewing, our role is to review those, add some if we see some missing, right? But that the implementation aspect of it is going to come at a different time. Is that correct?
That's correct, and there are certain components that are coming now, such as the overlay zones, the implement it, and the change in the floor area ratio along Artesia. But some of the programs and policies, such as that, direct the city to pursue more parkland, for example, will come at a later date. And this is a guiding document that will help inform those decisions moving forward for the city, not just for the Planning Commission, and also inform whatever documents we develop, planning documents, in addition to that.
Right. Just a suggestion, it would be very helpful if there was a document that outlined these different steps. That would be helpful certainly for me and maybe for others, to get a sense of this movement, right? Of how this actually works through time.
And yes, we do have implementation measures for every one of these policies. So we need to, that'll be an appendix to this document, and we should get that circulated as well, because that's exactly right. And some of them are, to Mark's point, they're short-term, mid-term, long-term type measures that address each one of these policies.
Yes, that was another question. And I mean, when you look at all the policies, the first question you ask is, these are, besides understanding the policy itself, is how is that going to be implemented? Right? Right? So if you have, for every policy, if you have an implementation, at least, description. I know you included an implementation document, but that one was more general, right? It said, we're going to have these meetings, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But if you have, for every policy, you have an implementation action, right? That would be wonderful.
Well, that's something that we did go over with the General Plan Advisory Committee, if you recall, when we were assigning those measures to the different policies.
I could not find the document.
Oh, okay,
though. I couldn't find that document.
Okay.
So also a couple more suggestions. One is, we often talk about the FAR, right? Changing the FAR, F-A-R, right? And you've put a wonderful description here. But until, not only us, but the residents, until they actually see a 3D, until they see a 3D, if you're asking them to approve something, you're asking them to approve something without adequate information. They have no idea what they're approving unless they see a 3D example. Just take a block on Artesia, for example, and you're going to change it from 0.6 to 1.6. I don't think anyone has a really clear idea what that's going to look like, because you can't just give an example of a 2 or 3 story building, because the FAR depends on the size of the lot, right? Right? And how it's going to manifest depends on the size of the lot. So So my suggestion would be, give the residents an example of what that change is going to look like on Artesia. And,
Sheila, can I interrupt if you're there with that one? Okay, and I
absolutely.
think Commissioner Boswell had something he wanted to say.
absolutely.
Were you finished?
Well, I
No,
think
please
we
go
can-
ahead, please
we
go
can-
ahead.
Okay, more generally, so how is this supposed to work? We have requirements coming down from Sacramento that apparently take authority over everything, that we need to add housing. We need to add places where housing can be built. Whether it gets built or not, we hope it does, because if it doesn't, we're in trouble. And we want to add park space, because we're so park poor, we don't even know where to walk dogs. If we don't have, if we were to have land available, and I'm not sure where it would be to create a park, isn't Sacramento going to say, no, that's low-income housing? How are we ever going to have more parkland as long as we have this continuous pressure that has resulted from Sacramento to add housing, that has resulted in a city like Redondo Beach being forced to have overlays because there's no more land? We've already cannibalized industrial and commercial space such that this thing here about jobs, housing balance is, I don't know what that's supposed to mean, because you can't work here unless you have your own business or you work at a retail job or at Ralph's. So how is this all supposed to work? These are great things that we would like to see and struggle with, but we've jammed way too much stuff in the box, as far as I can see. How are we supposed to get parkland in the current environment?
Well, I think that's a good question, and currently the state is prioritizing housing, and they're leaving it to cities to figure out how to absorb that, how to fulfill other priorities that they have, such as parkland. I will say that the city does charge a Quimby fee for new residential units, which goes into a fund that will help support future parks. But on top of that, it could just be in the design of the housing development. Maybe there needs to be in the standards a place where they leave some room for open space or smaller parks on those individual sites.
Where?
Yeah, and it's limited. But the bottom line is, I think what you're
Can't have a park overlay.
what you're suggesting makes sense. I think housing, it's really the state's priority, and the city is left being in the position of trying to figure out how we can manage it and how we can balance it with other priorities. And I don't have a good, perfect
I'm not
solution to
really
that.
making a suggestion. I'm
Yeah.
I'm scratching my head and saying, this is all just mumbo jumbo. Okay,
Well, not
how is
really.
this supposed to work? How are we ever going to take someplace in Redondo Beach and make it into a park? Because where in Redondo Beach do we have land that doesn't have something already sitting on it? And the only time something that's sitting on the land is removed is because there's already a project to replace it, a new home, a new whatever, a hotel, whatever. Where in this city do we have a place that could possibly be dedicated to more open parkland? Where?
So there is a policy in the general plan that directs the city to pursue the AES site and convert that into parkland. So that's one potential solution that would bring us more into a line with that.
So in respect to that, is the wetlands, the required wetlands area considered parkland?
It would be,
That
it'd
whole
be,
area,
Even though you can't really go in there?
Doug, that area is not included in
Yeah,
the
but
housing
you're
element.
wet.
So the housing element deals with the homes that we're required to build.
Right.
So as long as, I'm thinking about this and how we're going to handle this for the next few months. And I think each of you should have red flags. And when we start to talk about stuff that's in the housing element, a flag goes up and we all move on. But we have huge plans for, hopefully areas and.
Okay, wait a minute.
But the
We have
houses are
huge
in
plans
the,
for areas? What kind of areas?
well, AES, as they said, that's huge. That's
In the
35
power line
acres.
corridor, which is 20
Yeah.
acres.
We've got the
And
whole
the
power
SCE
line
right
thing.
away.
That's huge.
So that's what it's really talking about, is the land that's going to come available because of the power plant shutting down.
It's saying any
And the power line's coming
opportunity
down.
that we have.
Okay.
This is in the next 20 years. Any opportunity that we have, you could donate your property for a park.
And then Sacramento says, oh, no, that's got to
No,
be
no,
housing.
because you're. So, okay, I think Commissioner, did you have something, Commissioner? Okay, Commissioner
Been saying that
Conroy?
for years.
Those two, I know,
I'm sorry,
I
Conroy.
have one
and
too
then-
as well.
Yes.
sure.
The microphone picks you up.
Excuse me. So just so I have a better, excuse me, understanding, is the idea that there's a requirement rather that we need to change these zoning and land use? That's what we need to do by February of 2025? Not necessarily that we have to have any particular amount of these units built, but it's just the zoning, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, my next question. So then, are these changes going to take place only in the overlay zones, or are there going to be any citywide changes?
Primarily in the overlay zones, that's where the city has designated those properties to help meet our arena. But there are other zoning changes to bring the city into compliance with other state laws to help reduce some of the barriers to housing. And it looks like Sean's brought those up on the screen there. For example, adjusting the parking requirements to kind of right sizing it based on the number of bedrooms and some other things as well.
As it relates to parking requirements, because right now we have current requirements, parking for like multifamily, you have to have a certain amount of parking and so forth, commercial as well, but we're talking about residential right now. So what type of changes are we talking about? Are we talking about reducing the parking requirements because we're gonna have more people and it's not feasible to also have more parking? Is that
Well, one of the
general?
issues, and Sean can correct me if I'm wrong, currently the zoning requires 2 or more parking spaces per unit. It doesn't take into account number of bedrooms. You can have a 1-bedroom apartment and it still requires over 2 parking spaces. So the intent is to bring that more into alignment with what the actual parking demand is. And I don't know if you want to add to that, Sean.
That's correct. So there'd be like a scale, parking for a 1-bedroom, I think is 1.5 parking spaces per that 1-bedroom unit. Then at 2 bedrooms, it moves up to the 2. And I think that's the maximum per unit, but there might be a third iteration in there somewhere, but those are the details we're working out now.
Okay, in general, I would be in favor of that because it seems to me like that creates a bit of a pain point for, one unit having 4 vehicles because there's not going to be parking or easy parking, and it's going to hopefully push more people to riding bicycles or taking public transportation. I see a lot of bike paths throughout the city, but I don't know much about the public transportation. What do we currently have? Pardon me. And is there anything as part of this in the works for increasing routes or increasing public transportation in any way?
That's another section.
There's not currently in any of the amendments we're proposing or that are being proposed as part of the general plan update components we're going through here. But certainly in the circulation element, there's, that's where some additional policies could come into play that would begin to, push for reduced headway times at bus stops, more routes. And that's kind of, that's a huge part of it. A big part of trying to get people out of cars is improving and increasing, the options for transit, public transit. And, it's hard to force people out of their cars when we don't really have a good public transit system in place to pick the slack up. So.
Chicken or the egg?
Yeah, it really is. And so we got Metro coming in and hopefully, putting a new station, down on Hawthorne. We'll see how that goes.
I could envision almost like a trolley system, something that just
Yeah.
goes up and down PCH, up and down Artesia, up and down Aviation, or kind of maybe connects us back,
Cable car.
Huh?
Cable car.
Cable cars.
Oh, what an
Cable car.
idea, the red car.
We got the wires from the AES, from the right away. Last question, and I'll pass the
Yes.
gavel.
Okay.
Okay, How does this relate for rezoning? Does it affect air rights on existing buildings? Like imagine within the city zoning, there's a maximum of certain amount of stories, certain amount of floors, and is part of the solution here building higher?
It would be with respect to where the FAR changes are occurring. And those increases in FAR, those are going to drive, more dense development. Our residential, and those will happen largely in the overlay zones that we're creating. Those are going to have to be higher, greater number of stories, taller structures.
But we don't know what that number is yet.
We don't know. We're working on that, kind of playing with some programs to see what, how high these will go.
The current zoning has limits though,
The
right?
current zoning is largely two-story in most of our residential, R2 and R3. And then in our mixed use, we allow a third and with additional setbacks and a fourth story.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Light and then Commissioner Gaddis, sorry.
And looking at this number, this 2,490 housing units, all in these overlay zones, I'm just curious on where they come up with these, very low income households, 936, and low income, these numbers. I understand you don't build them, but you encourage bids to do these as these different things. I don't see developers having a real rush on building these very low income because they don't make much money for them. So what makes us believe that any of this would happen other than they just build the most expensive ones? I mean, once you reach your max on those, then you'll have to say no. If you want to build one, you now have to do average house or moderate homes. Is that what you envision happening? This has got to happen somewhere else. Do you have any insights on that?
Well, it's partially through incentives, so there's density bonus incentives which are state law, which you could receive if you do for doing affordable housing, and that's one of the zoning amendments that's going to be coming before the Planning Commission as part of this package. Also, the housing element directs the city to prepare an inclusionary housing ordinance, which would require that a certain percentage of the new units need to be affordable. And that's something that we will be working on over the next year. And it's going to come after the general plan. And that really takes it away from incentive, and it's more mandated that at least a certain percentage of the units must meet these categories.
And how do they enforce that? Because they can charge usually what they want for rent and how much they cost. Is there any mechanism to ensure that these remain very low income after they build them and say they're going to be?
So it's deed restricted, so it runs with the land. And then Sean, do you know, is it the community services? Do they enforce that?
Yeah, they manage it. Then our community services department, the housing authority there in that department enters into a contract as well. They manage to make sure the income level of the tenants is within the affordability category. So they're required to monitor that,
Commissioner Light. I would just tell you, I have some experience on that from the owner side, where we had buildings where a number of the units were determined to be like lower income or affordable housing. And at least for us, the construction was the same, the unit was the same, but we were limited to how much rent we could charge. And it would be spread out like a certain number of 2 bedrooms, 1 bedroom, and so forth. And we would designate which units those were. And then they would, of course, monitor periodically our rent roll to make sure that we were following the rules.
Okay, and Commissioner Gaddis.
Yes, on page 15 of the agenda packet, it's titled at the top, zoning ordinance updates included in projected build out of proposed project. Under the fourth row down, updates to all residential high RH zones. The last part of that says, these map changes are located, period, period, period. It appears that maybe this wasn't completed, or I wasn't curious, I was ready to pull out a map, or at least find a map that I could find where this, because it is a change now from what we saw at GPAC, because, and the changes were naturally required, it was required to implement the housing element program. So I was just curious as to where those are. There is a map, right? And it's going to be either included or something?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, the zoning map, that'll say exactly what the zone change is for, each of the change areas, all the
Right.
housing sites. And it'll also have the general plan designation that's associated with it.
Right.
So, yeah, that's,
And those were all, these are things, do I understand correctly, agreed after GPAC did what it did?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it's like, HCD came in
Totally.
and said, okay, great, except you're going to have to increase that
exactly.
by
yeah.
2 units.
That's probably the biggest change that occurred to the general plan update that's coming before you from GPAC was the land use map, because the state, and the RENA allocation and, there was a number of, GPAC had a number of, GPAC had worked out they were done with a land use map, and then the state came in, and SB 330, and then the RENA allocation, and it really changed a lot of what had been worked on and completed by General Plan Advisory Committee.
We
So,
practically did it parcel by parcel, and then,
Yeah.
HCD basically came in
Yeah.
and said, yeah, great,
It was-
here's how it's actually going to look, But anyway, so I do understand correctly, there will be an accompanying map, or there is one, and I just couldn't find it.
no, it's being reviewed and finished
Oh, okay.
over the next week.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yes, Sheila?
In the overlay zones, what level of interest have you already, or, yes, interest from property owners have you had so far? So, for example, Kingsdale, right?
Kingsdale, I don't know if he came to any of our GPAC meetings, but there was a developer
Yeah.
that was really queued up to
Yes.
to do a project, and
Yes.
he's still in contact.
Yes.
So there's almost all the sites had property owner interest in the overlay.
All the
Yes.
overlay zones have property.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Now, that leads to my second question, and that is this. What or when is it possible to really do a next level design for these overlay zones?
Well, there's you got the blue folder item, everybody? There's some references in the housing element that actually show some illustrations on each one of these housing sites of what, just a rough vision of prototype for a potential housing site, or on the potential housing sites of a development. So that's already in the housing element now.
I was actually thinking of something different.
Oh, okay.
And that is, forgive me, I've forgotten the term, but it's a way it's really not zoning. It goes into more detail so that it would allow the city to be more specific about what could be placed on the streets.
Are you
There's a
referring to form-based code?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Apologies for getting that term. For example, right, is it possible, to be looking at form-based codes for these overlays. And would this be the time?
I think it's definitely possible. Ideally, now would be the time. We also have this tight deadline we're working against as well.
How could
What
we,
I would-
could we finesse it somehow?
Yes, I think the key is, and I know the Planning Commission worked on the objective residential design standards. And if you look at the third bullet item right there, it says it's an administrative approval on these RENA sites if 20% of the units are affordable, which means it would not even come before the Planning Commission. So I think it's really important that we have really solid design standards that basically dictate, ideal design for these properties. So I think that is important, and we'll try to weave it into this effort as well. And I have it on the list. I know, and we talked about this, bringing back the residential design standards and trying to get a little more specific and address some of these potential larger projects that are going to be coming through over the next few years.
Well, also, I think on the form-based codes, what I think it's important for the council to hear, that this is about ensuring high quality, right? And through form-based codes, also, the idea that you could add open space, right? Because you have more control. My understanding, and it could be limited, that you have more control when you use form-based codes.
You do, and what the form-based code does is it's very specific about the look and design, but it does give the developer a menu of options to choose from so that they can still be creative, and ultimately you obtain good design. So that's one of the benefits of a form-based code is there's more certainty in terms of what you're going to get, but it also allows for some flexibility as well.
And creativity.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Yes.
I wanted to ask Mr. Scully a couple of questions. Going back to February about the floor area ratio or FAR, and I've seen several, at least 3 people that were on the GPAC who repeatedly gone over the public and saying that you never covered, the FAR was never covered in any of the GPAC meetings, which I found incredibly hard to believe because I went to a bunch of meetings. And so I followed up, looked at the minutes, and I saw at least 3 meetings in 2022 in March, August, and September where it was definitely covered. It's on the agenda, it's in the packet, the policies are in it. And I looked at the minutes, I saw that these same 3 people attended 2 of those meetings and they were there. And the third one, for some reason, all 3 of them decided not to go to it. So I don't know what to say about that. And I think the concern.
Hold on one second. The FAR on commercial or residential?
Well, the FAR in general, but FAR in commercial.
Okay,
Specifically. And so it seemed like the only mystery is apparently some of these GPAC members are making comments out there in the public because either they didn't read the materials or not know what they were voting on. And I wanted to bring it up for the benefit of the Planning Commission and for anyone else watching it. There's a lot of disinformation. I know you covered it. I saw the minutes, it's in there. And I think we'll probably get more people commenting on the commercial part later. But just as a heads up, it's going to probably be coming our way at some time in the future. And since we are an advisory committee, I think it might not be a bad idea if we maybe advise the council that when they appoint people to some of these committees that they agree to go to them, read the material, and know what they're voting on. Because that can create some confusion. And I think a lot of people in the public not understand that this was covered very deeply, and you had almost 7 years worth of meetings. And so, and I went to a bunch of them. So I know you guys are really detailed, you covered a lot of stuff. And I just wanted to say that we'll probably hear more about it, but but I good for your nodding, I guess it was covered, right? So. Absolutely. Thanks.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. I wanted to say and add to Sheila's request, because I'm having a hard time envisioning, which we said in comment, or I talked to you guys about, this FAR on artesian aviation. So, and I know it has to do with setbacks and all of that. So are we is a 1.5 going to give us a 6-story buildings all along Artesia? Or is it going to give us, we have no idea visualizing what a 1.5 is. And I think that's so important for, the residents that live in that area that are going to want to know, is Artesia going to eventually look like Hawthorne? Or is it going to maybe look like Manhattan Beach, Sepulveda, Pacific Coast Highway? I mean, I need to see a picture. I can't discuss this, a 1.5, without envisioning what we're talking about. And I think it's not quite fair for the public not to understand. I mean, he may not want 6 stories in that derelict space that he talked about,
Can I add something?
Yes.
Maybe it'd be a good start to sort of illuminate why we made that change.
Well, we know we made it so people would come in, but that doesn't mean that we still need to, that people would invest in the area.
That's right.
But we still need to understand what a 1.5 looks like. Does it look like 3 floors? Does it look like Skechers? Does it look like a bank on Hawthorne?
Yeah.
What does it look like? Visually, what does it look like? Do you know what it looks like, Rob?
I think it depends on the property, really. But I think they can provide us with some guidance.
Yeah, and that's something, I agree. I think we do need that. We need a photo simulation. It shows a streetscape and provides an example of what the massing and style of the building could be. We actually spoke to PlaceWorks about that a month ago. They indicated they'd be providing something to us. However, I'm open to going out and hiring, because most architectural firms can prepare that, and getting a few sample sites and being able to share that with the planning commission, the community. Because I think it's important, because you say 1.5 and it's very abstract and it's hard to envision.
I mean, do you guys know what it looks like?
Well, I'll just have the,
I don't think so. I mean, we come up to the podium if you would. So,
I just wanted to ask, didn't you have a chart that showed?
excuse me, you have to come up to the podium. I apologize. Yeah, we need you on public record.
Yeah, right.
Well, we
Doesn't that-
all understand FAR. We deal with FAR all the time. We get that.
Doesn't that chart show that?
When our FAR, that's in a residential, for example, we have a 0.65 FAR. So we know what our homes look like, and we know what our homes look like on 5,000 square feet. We've got a vision of that. And I know what Artesia looks like at 0.5, right? What does it look like at 1.5? And if we don't have that to present to all of you, would you be okay with 8 floors next to the property that you're talking about? 8-story building?
Well, we already have, right in back of us, the Montecito, which is already like 4 or 5.
And that's on Hawthorne, on Artesia and Aviation.
I like that. I would prefer to the thing that's in back of me now, which is.
That's a residential unit.
Well, mixed use.
Yeah, it's a residential unit, but it's on Artesia.
Yeah, so we're
Montecito's
talking,
mixed
most of
use,
that, right, most of that area is commercial. So,
So I'll give you an example. I talked to Mo Sharifi, and he's about 2,400 Artesia. I don't know if you know that big lot there. He said he has a buyer for that, or there's already a buyer, that wants to put a food concept thing that would cover the entire lot. And it would be like a food fair, where they would bring in, once a month, they'd bring in tacos, then they'd bring in maybe Middle Eastern or something like that. All around the central plaza, and people would circulate and buy the food there.
Right.
So it would take up the entire lot, but it wouldn't be high.
so that would be close to a 1. Okay,
Yeah,
because
that would
that's,
be a
you've got,
1.
let's just say you have 3,000 square feet. That particular building takes 3,000, give or take the setbacks. What does 1.5 look like? We don't know. Does it, again, we have to be able to, you guys, the public and the planning commission and the city council has to be able to envision that to make an intelligent decision. Otherwise, we could be putting, who knows what on those streets. We don't know. We could make that into a Hawthorne Boulevard. Yes, we want people to come in. Economically, we want people to go to that area. That's the whole idea. But we have to also make it an area that you all want to live in, that we all want to live in.
let me
I'd be happy with a modern building in place of what's there now. I don't care how many stories it has.
Oh, you don't care? Okay.
100 stories.
Oh,
And I don't
really?
want
You're
to
okay
speak
with
for
that?
the entire public, but, a lot of Artesia, if you notice, there are a lot of very old buildings. And it doesn't look modern at all. It doesn't look inviting.
Well, that's the whole idea behind this, the APAC, and so you'd be really interested in that. That's just like plan for those two streets, and how do we make them exactly what you want? And we've been working on that, and so that's great. It's going to happen.
Great.
I'm positive about that.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Chair Hazeltine?
Yes.
So, and you too. So we keep talking about the 1.5. So is that on the FAR, is that our limit? Is that already established?
Well, that's what it's been proposed for Artesian Aviation.
Okay. So then the other side of the equation is the BCR. So do we have something for that as well? Because you can see on the chart that they made for us, with a BCR of 25%, a 1.5 is a six-story building. But if we're saying no, but we're restricted to a 50%, now we're talking about a three-story building. So do we have an established BCR or proposed?
We do not have coverage limitations. However, we do have setback and parking
Right.
standards that will require
Right.
open space portions of the property. The zoning ordinance that we're going to be bringing along with this general plan update is going to cap the height and the number of stories. So it's not going to be unlimited up to 8. And for a 1.5 FAR, I think it would be very unlikely that you would need any more than 3 stories in most cases. It's probably going to be most like the second row, the 50% where it intersects with 1.5 would be similar once you factor in the setbacks and the parking. So you'd probably get a 3-story building.
Yeah.
That said, I think it would be beneficial to have the photo simulations because this
that would be-
doesn't tell the full story and it really
Slides
is
to
going to
look
be.
at would be amazing.
yeah.
Sean, what do you think Skechers is?
What's that?
What do you think Skechers FAR is there? On Pacific Coast Highway.
What is that 3 stories? Is that-
Two.
Is it 2? That's it?
2 with the
Most of it's
parking,
big.
2.5,
I
3
mean,
maybe?
If they're, I think they're
think it's 3.
podium, or they're underground parking,
Yeah,
right?
but the whole
So-
lot is pretty
So
much
that's
covered.
probably close to a 2, you
Okay.
know?
Okay.
And that's where, parking is really the driver.
Right.
And as you guys know, the parking standards in the ACAP area have been reduced. So it's, it cuts both ways, you
Yeah.
know? But what a reduced parking standard will do is reduce the footprint of the parking lot, and that will allow more ground floor space of the development and fewer stories.
Right.
Right.
I think those buildings on PCH Skechers looks really nice. So I'm just saying, give us the idea. Yes,
Can I
Commissioner
offer in
Gaddis.
that one of our challenges in looking at all that is that the lots are too shallow to put effective
Yeah.
underground parking there. If those lots were deeper, all this could be done with underground parking. But unfortunately, it's just, they're not deep enough for underground parking.
Does that include Grubhub, which we have underground parking with?
Grubhub is that's a combination of 2 lots, right?
It is. If you get a bigger lot, you can pull off the underground parking scenario like Grubhouse did. That's a total of 3 lots that they
3 lots,
combined.
okay.
So, yeah, that's, with lot consolidation, you can, if you can get underground, that's going to really, that'll keep your stories low. So,
Right.
And I think it's unfortunate because the general plan identifies this as being a potential main street for North Redondo.
Right.
An auto-oriented main street. But parking really leads to poor design, in my opinion. You end up getting surface parking lots at the front of the lot. And you want to have the buildings up near the front and where they can engage the public.
Right.
What's really ideal for this part of town is if there was more consolidated parking structures that would handle the parking for these commercial sites, and that there not be any on-site parking requirements or very minimal, because it's
Yeah.
just so challenging to place. And that's something we'll have to look at as a city moving forward.
And that'll be in the general plan, what you're talking about. We'll discuss that, won't we?
It will, and the general
Okay.
plan lays out the vision for Artesia and aviation.
Right.
And then we also have that separate, it was kind of putting the cart before the horse, but it's a really good plan, the ACAP, which really gets more specific about that corridor.
Yeah, and it
Right.
talks a lot about what you're referring to, Mark, with the lot, lot consolidation and the parking lot consolidation as well, opening up. You've got two segregated parking lots that, that create more frontage driveways. There's just a lot of negatives to the way it's designed now. And if we can combine and create access and shared parking, that's really gonna allow us to bank the parking somewhere else and then have, a bigger footprint for the structure and fewer stories and closer to Artesia and,
Makes sense.
and a lot of that's in the ACAP plan.
Okay, I have another question. Could you go back to page 9? Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, 9 on your presentation, Sean, I think, whoever, that was on 9. Okay, so, public institution, 0.75 and 1.25. Government, schools, okay, so that's our city hall is at, right? And the fire department is 1.25 or some?
No, fire department is 0.75. Sorry, that's not crystal clear.
Okay, okay.
There's only 2 properties with the 1.25 recommended currently. City Hall, the property we're on now, and right across the street, the annex property where police is at, or
Okay,
their
gotcha,
facilities are right over there.
Okay, and then it says, is this just general? It says hospitals. We don't have a hospital any
Yeah,
longer.
no, I mean, that's just the types of uses that fall into the public institutional land use category.
Okay, okay. And then just where does Beach City's health district fit in here?
They fall into, they're kind of the quasi-hospital health facility, and currently the recommendation is 0.75 for there.
0.75,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, let's see. I think that's all I had. Anybody else? Yes. Oh,
Go ahead,
Commissioner
go ahead.
Boswell, pardon me.
Yeah, I definitely think it'd be a good idea for us to have some kind of a visualization of how far impacts the skyline on Artesia and aviation, and probably anywhere. Because as has been pointed out, you really can't tell. It's building by building, lot by lot. There was a comment in your presentation about this eventually going before the voters, and then there was something else about, there was a ruling that I didn't quite hear that well, that maybe that's been overridden and it won't go before the voters?
So let me clarify, and I probably was it's complicated, so I was probably tripping myself up as I explained it. So the council would be considering this and, potentially adopting it in October. And then there would be an item that would go in the November election where the voters would be voting on amending Article 27 to recognize that it is preempted by state law. And even though the court made that decision for us already, this is that could be appealed, or it's likely to be appealed and could be reversed. So that's why it's the belt and suspenders approach. I suppose if the voters, with the court decision, and if the voters decide to amend Article 27, then this may not have to go to the voters on a special election prior to February. We would be done. However, my reading of it is that the Artesia Aviation Corridor would require a vote, since that's not housing related.
Right.
And that's still subject to Article 27. So there's a lot of moving parts with it, but that's basically
So the court action was strictly in reference to residential.
that's correct.
So all of this commercial development is still going to go before the voters next March, or when?
But potentially, yes.
It doesn't have a deadline like the housing-related amendments do, so it can trail.
So then the general
So
plan
what-
would be broken up into, we'll vote on this, we'll vote on that kind of thing.
Well, the council would still adopt it, but I would say to ratify the FAR increase along Artesia, that would have to go to a vote.
Okay, gotcha.
So what happens if the people of Redondo Beach vote that down? What happens? What's our
And it
next
will-
step?
Then it will remain at the current limit, which is 0.6. Yeah, 0.6.
Do we not then try to come up with something that they will be happy with, that is better for attracting investment than what we have
I think that would be the city,
Be looking for some common middle ground?
it would be in our best interest to be strategic and just so the commission's aware, the reason the 1.5 FAR is being recommended is because at the current floor area ratio, it's not really incentivizing investment into the property, and especially when you factor in the parking standards. So really the idea is to up the level of the area and of the buildings. The plan for that area calls out 2 nodes where there would be more pedestrian-oriented features and potentially some city investment and public way improvements. So I think the city could make a good case that it would really benefit that corridor. And the 1.5, it's not going to be, in my opinion, a huge change to the character of the city. It's not allowing high rises. And that's where I think the visuals will help
Yes.
depict that.
Yeah,
And hopefully it helps get people excited if they see some nice looking, attractive
I
buildings
think
going
it will,
there.
Mark.
Yeah.
If we understand what we're getting, I think we'll all be happy.
So-
Okay, any,
Okay,
sorry,
go ahead.
Commissioner Lamb?
So we've talked a lot about the ACAP. Just a little bit of history. The GPAC decided that there were several options, decided that they wanted to see ACAP really grow organically. Organically was the key word. And I just want to report, as of today, right, the Artesia corridor is doing really well. We've got new, as a result of the work of staff and all our city partners, there's new businesses coming online almost every month. We've got a new bread place at the old Galleria, I'm sorry, Giuliano's. We have
Bakery.
Rosemary and Honey, right? Rosemary and Honey. They're very popular.
Place is finally open.
Full house. We've got the new noodle shop coming at Denny's.
Nice.
Nice. So we have, and that's just on what is that, the
Aviation.
west side?
Yeah.
Right? That's on the west side. And so along with that, there's other new businesses. So it is beginning to thrive. So it's not destitute. It's not falling down, although we have a resident here who's pointed out that we still have a lot of work to do. But it is important to recognize that when good attention is put in that direction, that the community and the businesses are responding.
Sheila, what do you think GPAC meant by organic?
So what they meant was, instead of having, I think there was some discussion about sort of the type of development that the waterfront, right, were proposed, where you would sort of you would make it attractive to really redevelop the whole area, right? And it was decided by unanimously that people did not want that.
Right, so they just want, yeah.
Right, and I think we're going to get exactly what the residents want. In addition to all the work that you described, Director Weiner. Right.
So something I would like to do once the regulations are changed is really spearhead an economic development effort to try to encourage some investment in that area and attract high-quality businesses to the corridor. And I think once we have this plan fully realized, we'll be able to do that. And then speaking to the comment about organic versus the alternative, probably the alternative would be like a block-long, like planned development, something that really encompasses a larger area as compared to individual sites or property owners with their own development plans.
Right.
And it's phased over time where you still have some of the older stock of the buildings that are there, and it's not just completely, redeveloping an entire block.
I would just like to add that when you organically build, you're honoring the placemaking, right? Artesia is a place that residents are familiar with. They walk on the streets. They might not be exactly happy with it, but it is their place,
Right.
right? And when you think about it organically, transitions over time, then you honor the place itself and over time how it changes. And you become, as a resident, you become part of that change.
Thank you. Commissioner Boswell.
I think maybe a combination of the two is more appropriate because, you can do piecemeal development as somebody takes over a property or buys a property and develops that property. It's limited to the borders of that property. You have something like Grub House, which basically replaced two structures and then added the lot behind it to come up with something far better than could have been on any one of those lots. The idea of, I've had it in my mind for years since I was told that a lot of those properties along Artesia are not only owned by out-of-state people, they're dead. And it's now trusts that are actually running these things. And trusts are terribly risk adverse. What's the advantage that an attorney has to develop that property when it's paid off, property taxes are incredibly low, and they've got enough tenants in there to where they're making money? What's the incentive? But if somebody takes an entire block of those things, scrapes it, and puts up something even better than Grub House to make it a little interesting for them, it's a win. It's a big win because some of these places are not going to redevelop short of some natural disaster that knocks the building down
But that could
or a
be
suspicious fire in the dry cleaner next door.
Commissioner Boswell, that could be considered organic, though. I see Grubhub as an organic movement.
It's a hybrid, I would think. But what you call it isn't really what's important. It's that Artesia, as this gentleman pointed out, is still full of properties that are way underperforming or not performing at all.
Yeah.
Because the owner doesn't want to take the tax bite when he sells the property, or whatever reason. The trust attorney is happy with, just being part of a portfolio where this is like less than 1%. So are there incentives that we can make to these property owners? Or on the other end, is there a stick where we can say, you come up with some kind of parameters that this property is underperforming or not being used at all, and now there's a vacancy penalty, or there is a blight penalty that will then say, that attorney will say, well, shoot, this is now costing us more than we're making. Let's do something different with this property, or let's get rid of it. What are our options on speeding up the process of getting these derelict properties to become productive?
Well, I think you referenced two of them, having a vacancy tax on the building. The city could pursue a more robust commercial property maintenance ordinance that would look to ensure that properties are maintained in better condition. They don't have to be blighted for the city to be able to enforce against those properties. And then other incentives, that's a good question. That's something we'd have to explore, but I think the two you mentioned are definitely in the right ballpark.
And
So is that something that you think should be on the fast track to come up with something that's going to speed up development and get rid of these derelict properties?
I do, and that will go along with the economic development effort that's going to be focused on the corridor. And I'm excited because we have this really great plan and vision for it, and now we need to implement it and find a way to get the investment into that location. And there's different strategies the city can use, and some of it's, the combination of the carrot and the stick for it. And you would hope that as properties start to get improved, that increases the value, and then potentially some of the underperforming ones will be sold and then by people who want to improve those properties, or purchased by people who want to improve.
Is there a policy that we should add in our land use element?
That's something, yeah, we can take a look at that. So when now that we've provided the introduction, just go through the policies and in the context of this discussion, and if the commission has any added ones that you think should be included, we could start incorporating those at the next meeting, which is going to be in August, right? Yeah, August.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, I have a question, and this is just going to be really specific on our role going forward. So if we look at, where'd I put it? Hold on. Okay, it's really, where'd I put it? Hold on. Okay, well, let me just give you an example. I can't find it right off the bat. So in the land use area, no, that's it. It's not in land use, pardon me. Go ahead. Does anybody else have a question? Gosh darn it, I want to find it. Okay, I got it. Hold on, everybody. Okay. I know everybody wants to go home, but I have to clarify this.
Take
so
up
that-
some time on something interesting. My
When
comment
we-
about parks earlier.
Yes, go ahead.
I had, during mentioning that, I had kind of a flashback to college. My economics of public finance had an entire section on how do you pay for parks. And of course, being a 20, 21-year-old college kid, it never even occurred to me that this was an issue. Parks are just there, of course, the city takes care of them, that's what we do, that's tax money. It's way more complicated. I mean, there were so many schemes that were presented, trying to figure out who's benefiting from the park and how do you get those people to chip in some respect. Wow. So I think this is not, adding more parkland to a city, especially a pretty much fully developed city like this, it really does come down to, how do we get the land and then how do we keep it going?
Yeah.
And it's nice that there's this huge property down in South Redondo that's going to almost certainly add to our open green space and parkland. But then we have the wasteland of residential North Redondo, which is, people don't even go in their front yards. So there's some definite challenges there.
And, in the open space and conservation element, there is that goal of funding, and there's a whole host of policies, and those are a lot of mechanisms in there that, that will be part of the multiple strategies that the city's going to be looking to pursue to try to get the funding, the financing. So I need to go back and look at those policies myself.
And how do we keep Sacramento from knowing it's not housing? Do we just
Well, one way is we make sure we have a certified housing element.
Right. Yeah, but
You
we
know.
got to do that anyway.
Yeah. And then our zoning is intact, and we don't allow residential uses in our public institutional designation. And that holds up if we have a certified housing element.
Okay.
You're saying so they don't put condos in the courtyard over here?
Not currently,
Okay.
couldn't
Do we
do it.
really need a high school?
Put it in the field.
My kids are out of school. I don't care.
Well, you don't use the center
There's
part
so
of the
much
track.
land.
Doug, you don't use the center part of the track, that's just open space.
That's right. There could be buildings in there. A grub hub.
Okay, you know what? I'm
That's-
just gonna, I can't
That's where
find
the
the
field
exact.
events go. Are you kidding me?
Who cares? Underground, think of subterranean.
Thank you, Commissioner Boswell, for filling in, and I can't find the exact wording, but I'm going to give it to you somehow. So under, it talks about artificial turf, okay? And in artificial turf, it just basically says, well, let's discuss it. Well, this is a plan for the next 20 years, right? So would we be totally out of left field to just say, okay, what's our goal? Our goal is to ban artificial turf in the city of Redondo Beach. Is that just out of left field and we're not supposed to do that as a planning commission? Or is that kind of what we're talking about?
That's what we're talking about.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, another example is that we need stronger language on the bioswales and water capture. We can make that stronger, right? Okay, I got what we're after. So I think for all of us to understand what it is when we come back, so it'll be kind of like the design guidelines that we came up with 10 things that we wanted changed, or maybe it was 20, I don't remember anymore.
Yeah.
But it'll be like that, bullet points, change, make this stronger, right?
Correct.
Okay, good, perfect. Anybody else? No? Okay. Do we have, so we already received and filed the report. Thank you very much for that. Items from staff, do we have anything?
No.
I think we've done enough talking tonight, so
Okay.
thank you.
Does anybody up here have anything? Yes,
started
Commissioner
late.
Boswell.
We
Spoke a little bit about Grub House.
Yeah?
Do we have any idea when that's going to open?
Well, they're very nearly completed their building permit plan check process, and the building permit is getting close to being ready to issue.
A building permit.
The building permit, and then they'll
We have a little
start right
ways to
away.
go. What's the cross street for that?
It's McKay,
Artesian McKay?
Artesian McKay.
And I believe the ball is in the applicant's court and
Yes.
has been for the past couple months. So
Yeah.
the city's not holding it up.
Oh, there's something about funding, I think I read.
No, I don't think so. I think
Only the builder.
they were working really closely with Public Works on a couple of issues, but it was, it's very, very close. We're
Gotcha.
waiting for them to bring the plans in, and it should, with all the revisions and corrections, and it's really, I think, just a matter of a few weeks at the most.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, could I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, so be it.
I got a name vote on
Director
that.
Buckweiner and
Yes, thank you, guys.
It has to be unanimous.
Mr. Scully.